Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining my live stream. We've done a less than a handful of these, so we're still working out some kinks, so appreciate the patience. So this one is a slightly different version this time around. We're going to lean in a little bit more on the guest experience and enhancing on the guest experience. So if you've watched any of them, this will be a little bit different, but it's still really is just going about looking at some of the basics that we all know. My name is Ryan Powers. I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Business Solutions here with Sensory 360. You might also know me from a brand called SoundFox. So the idea with this is, we've been in the car business. I've been in about 20 years. So some of you have been in maybe a little longer, maybe a little less. We all probably have some classic training in the car business, but we're really trying to bring this back to the basics here on this series, but also making it transferable when it comes to the technical side of things. So the digital realm. So we call it "Don't waste the wait." So looking at missed revenue opportunities during the guest visit, and what some of our forward-thinking dealers are doing about it. So without further ado, everything starts with a hello. So at first, hello. What is this? What does your store feel? Right? What's the guest looking at when they first walk in? Is every experience consistent across the days, across the time, across the staff, across the locations? And then what is the common denominator that we have for long-term business? So as people are joining, this is a classic training tool. It's super obvious. I gave you the first one just right out of the gate. So you have to. There's three people. So three metrics that you have to start any relationship or build any building relationship or starting any sale process. The first one is the know. Right. You have to be able to know the person. You have to be familiar with them. If it's a brand, you have to be familiar with the brand, recognize it, know what the value it brings. And then what do we think the second one is? Feel free to chime in the comments, and we'll take a look. But anyone have any ideas? The second one is like. So you have to be able to like them, right? At some point there's some sort of likability. There's an interest level if it's a brand. You have to see yourself, potentially, giving the opportunity to provide the business. Anyone have an idea on the third one? It's trust, right? It's the obvious one. So you have to know, like, and trust someone or some brand in order to even give them the opportunity to do business. If you don't have all three of those, then you are more than likely going to have some issues when it comes to that. So that's something to think about. The moving on. So when we're looking at the guests that are walking in, and I use the word guests because yes, they are guests. They are not customers just yet. Until they're busting bugs or closing an RO, they are just a guest. But the average, and I know you, and I do encourage you to know your own metrics, but on average, it does look like about 4 hours is spent, and they're going to do business with you or they're not. So 61% of customers say buying a car can be one of the most stressful processes. I would tend to agree with that. Even if you're in the car business, it can be stressful, especially if you don't have an in and you're physically shopping around and going through the experience and not really understanding the process. So, the experience can be inconsistent. It can feel different at different times, different energy levels, different staff, different environments, different location. So that is an inconsistency worth talking about. And then the variable of without inconsistent environments, the guest experience can depend entirely on the circumstance, right? There's no strategy. So there's you're not controlling the variables, right? So that's the idea here. So I'm going to start with the cold hard truth of it all. 8 out of 10 guests will walk out the door and purchase somewhere else, right? We don't know what would have made them stay. We don't know what made them leave, but obviously having a consistent branded experience and can positively influence buying behavior. So yes, there's always, they might still be in the room, but what are they looking at? What are they experiencing? What are they being told? So that opinion is still being shaped. at every touch point, everything they hear, everything they look at. Um, they aren't they're not lost, they're just undecided. So when you think about it, like most guests are leaving still undecided, with but not without interest of having that opportunity. So they knew you, liked you, and trusted you enough to take time out of their day to come in, right? So they're not lost, they're just undecided. So somewhere along the way, we messed up the experience, or maybe we messed up the value prop, but they're still there, right? And then the critical window. So as they're you're still building, um, that relationship, the door's still open. So every moment is a chance to make that a positive one. Where's the foot traffic going? So obviously we know a lot of this, but you have showroom, which is high traffic with moderate conversion. Service drive is obviously the highest volume, but a lot of the upsells go unsold. Um, Parts and accessories is a high margin, comparatively, right? But there's little to low awareness. The F&I office is very high value, but very undereducated as well, especially with the program and the details. In fact, most people don't even know what F&I is until they have already committed to a vehicle and already committed to a budget, and they're just being pushed a little bit further. So again, it'd be nice to have some education surrounding the entire ownership experience. I'm in the guest lounge, captive audience, but sort of an ignored opportunity. So which of the profit centers for you are underperforming and why? That might be worth kind of looking into. Um, so maybe it's an parts and accessories program. Maybe you do some service drive training. Maybe you're doing some education on the F&I products. I'll pause for a second, see if we have any questions. Give me one sec here. Okay, it doesn't look like we have any questions. So I'll keep moving on here. Let's see. Okay. So what happens after hello, right? So impressions speak first. They came in with the interest. We had, the environment's there. But from there, what are they hearing? What are they seeing? What are they interacting with? Whether it's touch screen or otherwise, how they feel sort of shapes the confidence or pushes them to uncertainty, right? So thinking also about the right message at the right time to the right person. I mean, that is also a fundamental of sales. So, guests are going to naturally encounter information. Let's talk about financing, protection plans, service programs. Your team should be having conversations that are yielding confidence, and also the systems around them should be supporting. Um, that encouraging moment that they made the right decision to do business with you. So you know this is all with your current traffic. So I want to kind of just stop for a moment, because that this is important, that going back to the 80/20, this is still with your current traffic. We're not looking at ways to push more traffic. We're just looking at ways to optimize that 8 out of 10, or that 8 out of 10, and or 2 out of 10 that you're selling, right? Because if your team is strong as death, I'm sure they're closing 2 out of 10. That was just kind of a median. Maybe you have a better closing ratio. I hope you know what yours are in terms of your total monthly foot traffic and how many cars there were, or how many closed ROs there were, that will kind of yield. And then some of you that are a little bit more forward thinking even put some delineation around who came in for service versus who were just walk ups, right? So our systems and some of our clients, just for example, we've been able to increase purchase and upsell opportunities in smart shoppers by up to 41%. So I know that's a mouthful, but what that means is smart shoppers spend 8 hours or more online doing research, coming in with a particular purpose, and then made an unplanned purchase after hearing or seeing one of our ads. So that is the idea of really taking the time to have an intentional experience being led, and all revenue columns or zones of your store. So in terms of, what we're talking about, right? We're talking about maybe digital displays, overhead audio messaging, guest lounge TVs, touch screens, signage, tablets, mobile and QR touch points. 80% of shoppers report that this is an accepted form of marketing. So it will be accepted from them. They're not going to be annoyed. Obviously we don't want to, the term spam is relative, right? Spam is any unwanted messaging. So you want to make sure that the message is relevant and it's targeted. And it's something they might want to hear. So you do have a mix of the style of content that you might want to hear as well. So, it's not just specifically salesy content. It's talking about your dealership's history, how you got started, what makes you different than the others down the street, what community outreach you have or specific programs you have. Nothing really salesy per se, but things that, are informative and engaging. I thought this would be a nice little graph to throw in there. I am a little biased, overhead audio messaging is great because it works passively. You can put it store wide. It's always on. And it doesn't require the guest attention. It's great ambient influence, especially when you talk about the branded messaging aspect of it. Not to say that the others don't have their place, but this is a great starting point. So, digital displays work partially passively, but you have to capture their attention. You can put them store wide, but it can be it can get expensive if you're having displays literally everywhere. They do stay always on, and it doesn't require guest action, but it is a visual attention near the screens that really makes the difference. Sort of the same thing with lounges. They got to be in there to pay attention to them and see them and get education from them. Signage and waypoint, a little less impactful. They do work passively if you're walking by them. You don't really want to put them store wide though, so it doesn't cover the same amount. It can't always be on. It does not require guest action, although to retain the information, I would argue that you do have to at least have some interaction with the signage or the wayfinding. Mobile and QR, a little bit different. Does not work passively whatsoever, but it is very hyper targeted. Can work store wide and even outside the store, which is great. But it's more of a follow up and lead capture, maybe post visit. Tablets and kiosks, this is more deeper engagement. It's one guest at a time, so you can't really do a store wide reach, although it's a great option for having something that's always on, that's really providing engagement and information for whatever you're looking at. So great tools to look at when coming up with a content mix. Any questions so far? Okay, we'll keep moving here. So again, telling your story, right? Again, this isn't about being salesy. I think I covered that earlier, but your history, what makes you different, the community involvement, the ownership programs, these are things that really are going to move the needle when it comes to creating that continuity of maybe multi-locations, or the continuity from the marketing ad dollars that you've already spent, that you want to have filter through the doors and inside the walls of your store, and really just adding that polished experience regardless of the day, the time of day, the staff, etc. Right? So getting into that we're talking about that continuity gap again, right? One brand, one voice, every visit. So that's the idea here. So the flip side is that when you do have a disconnect, it kind of quietly erodes that trust. So we know, I know that an average dealer is spending tens of thousands a month, sometimes even hundreds of thousands to advertise, right? To some people who may not know you, like you, or trust you, to bring them to the walls, right? To bring them to the front door. So what are you doing once they hit the front door? That's the concept here. So right, you can either, there's a risk in not doing anything when you think about it, right? I mean, that's like anything in life, but there's a risk to not make this a priority, because it will quietly erode that trust. Dealerships are typically in communities. Communities have word of mouth. It should be a priority at least to control the experience and try to minimize any fallout, which I believe is going to bring me to a couple of slides that's going to bring this point home. So obviously, you can't do all this at once, but it's small steps, big vision. So take an audit, take a look at what you're doing right, take a look at what you're doing wrong, things that could be improvement, kind of like a SWOT analysis, right? The strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of your store, and then make a prioritization of what needs to happen. I like the quadrant idea. So to take a quadrant, right? You have low effort, low impact, high effort, high impact, low effort, high impact, and then high effort, low impact. And you want to obviously do the ones that have high impact first, in my opinion. So those are, think of the low hanging fruit versus things that are going to have a big difference, and then just put an execution in play. Every dealer should be asking, what small change can we make today that can improve the guest experience when they arrive? This should always be running in parallel to any direct sales that you're doing. So, this is kind of ancillary, but the guests are feeling, so the employees, they're living it, right? So with a major purchase, there's or unexpected repair, guests are arriving with some real financial stress. The environment is either going to ease that or it's going to add to it. It's somewhat binary. So an intentional ambiance will reduce the guest and employee fatigue. It will create a little bit more of a cohesion and that trust barrier that we all know and experience. The content program should be able to lower ambient stress. It should answer some FAQs that they might have along the way. It will lead to more informed interactions and decision making. And the calmer the environment should support some of these, these interactions when it gets sticky. We've kind of talked about a lot. We're beating a little bit around the bush here, but I want to hit the bullseye. If you have unmanaged content, it is a risk. So aside from licensing violations, so if you're playing an iPod or an iPad in your showroom, technically that's illegal. You need to make sure that if it's on a screen or it's overhead, that you're paying the rights for commercial consumption, right? Commercial licensing compliance, fully covered. Even if that's the case, let's just say you're playing radio, you might have inappropriate content that's happening. You might have repetitive content that's happening. And you might even have competitive content that's happening. So competition ads, right? Competitive ads. So even if it was serious radio, although you might not have competitive ads, you're going to have the inappropriateness, the repetitiveness. I mean, Sirius is, I love Sirius, don't get me wrong, I have it in my car, but it is just radio delivered satellite. You want to have intentional business focused solutions for your audio, for your on-screen, your on-screen presence, whether it's in the lounge or in the showroom. And you want to make sure that you have full control over the language and atmosphere. That's the point. So, smarter conversations do start before hello. So this is kind of like a flipping it's on its head a little bit, right? So engaged, keeping them engaged, and they're going to form better questions. As I said earlier, you can start to pre-sell, right? I mean, some of the F&I products can be pre-sold if they're educated correctly. Having some of the heavy lifting being done, that may take longer decision making. Think of service packages or brand differentiators, and then guiding them to the next steps. I mean, if you really want to get very forward thinking, you can think through like conversation starters with QR codes and tablet prompts and guide guests to the next action. It could lead to less friction along the way. So just giving some samples, right? So someone's walking in, they're wandering, it's low energy, there's no one around. They see salespeople sort of side eye them, and they're busy with somebody else, so they're really focused on making their sale. No one's in sight, and they're just kind of like, I got questions, but I don't even know where to begin, but I don't want to feel like I'm getting sold. So that's just not. It's a very neutral / negative first impression. So the principles in the showroom are pretty simple, right? These are things that we all know about, but sometimes it's worth just saying out loud. But the key principles are capturing, hold the attention, instill the brand confidence and trust that they're making the right decision here, and reinforce them why it's important to buy here than someone down the street. So, we should be guiding them and not overwhelming them, aligning with their buying moment. Now, I get everyone comes in the store and saying, we're just looking. I get that. And maybe train your staff to work around that, right? What are we just looking for, right? Some version of that type of question. And aligning with the buying moment that they're saying they're in. If they're just, in the discovery phase, let's align with that. If they're saying that they have some specific, no-goes, let's align with that. If they're saying, hey, we need a third row SUV, let's go ahead and align with that. So, let's subtly influence and remove. And I use some of my old school training that sales really isn't about selling anyone. It's about removing any of the obstacles from allowing them to make an informed decision, right? So as long as I have something of value, they know, like, and trust me enough, and I'm being a good steward of their time by removing any of the obstacles that may be in the way from them making the right now informed decision, then I'm doing my job. So subtly influencing and as opposed to hard selling is kind of the key. Same thing with the service drive. So maybe they're standing by a car, they don't see anyone at the service desk. They're not sure what's next, right? Is this all I do to check in? Should I go to the lounge? Do I need to go up to the service advisor? No one's standing there. There's one guy at the end of the counter, but he's just kind of like heads down and he's typing. I'm not sure what to do here. Now I'm starting to get late for work. So what are the key principles here? We want to build a relationship over transaction. More quality relationships always will always till the end of time increase RO gross. That's just the facts of life. Better, longer quality conversations in the service drive equal better RO gross. Period. So how do we create better quality conversations? How do we build conversations to build relationships as opposed to being the transactional focal point? Maybe it's educate them while they wait. The value of servicing here. Why are they servicing here? Some of the approaches are promote warranties, prepaid maintenance programs, selling those directly at the counter, driving upsell and cross-sell awareness of their other profit centers in there. And then really it's about soft selling through the awareness and not pressuring. You don't want them to feel pressured as they're already bringing in the car for a reason. Even on hold stuff, right? So, 4 minutes in, it's dead silent. Did they forget about me? What am I waiting on hold for? I'm not hearing anything. Maybe I got disconnected. Click. So, there's some big stats around silent holds and the hang up rate around it. It's don't quote me on this. It's north of 70%. I think it's close to more to 80%. I think it was 78 the last time I saw it. If I go back and check my notes, but 78%ish hang up after the first minute with just a silent. And if you don't know this, well over 70% of your future floor traffic originates on the phone. I mean, that's part of the funnel, right? Is, they go from a visitor, to your site to calling in to visiting. So, every call is really an opportunity when you start to think about it. So, what are you telling them while they're waiting on hold? And trust me, I know you don't want them on hold, but they do end up being on hold. The average hold time across the nation is 2 minutes and 33 seconds, if I remember correctly. So it's actually a full minute less than the average song. So let's put some messaging on there. Let's talk about why they should be coming in. Promote while they wait. Reinforce that brand trust. So, maybe it's driving appointment bookings, promoting service specials or current offers, or just creating conversation starters. Again, talking about quality conversations start before hello. That's a great way to do that. The guest lounge, kind of same thing, right? Stale lounge. They got some weird stuff on the TV. It's kind of risky. Are they ever coming back? What's the status? I thought I was just getting an oil change. I thought the inspection was going to take, not too long. Are my brakes really that bad? Whatever it is, right? So let's curate the waiting experience, reduce the perceived wait time, try to create some engaging opportunities without interrupting maybe their day because they might be working. Let's offer more of a relaxed environment. And then how do we approach that? Model highlights and walkthroughs. let's do some surface F&I options and protection packages, promote loyalty programs. Maybe it's some upsell opportunities or ownership benefits, but this is a great opportunity to kind of reinvent this space. So, kind of wrapping things up here as we're getting closer to the half hour. So, we're building beyond the sale. You have a dealership that's in a community. We want to build beyond that sale. We really want to shift it from transaction to relationship building, guiding the ownership, intentional marketing, having a content strategy across all zones, the customer-centric culture, making decisions every day. Does this decision help the customer? Does this decision help the guest? If the answer is no, why are you making that decision, right? So start thinking through that. And then just kind of wrapping things up. So don't waste the wait. Every guest that walks through the door is an opportunity, and not just a sales opportunity, right? I need to talk my own talk as well. It's about building that relationship. So they're investing in what happens, once they arrive, right? So consistent brand experience, scalable, it's always on, something you could set and forget, but just fine tune along the way. And then don't forget, up to 41% more purchase and upsell opportunities can occur if you have an intentional content strategy with engaging systems along the way. That's it for me. So I was actually a little early today. I'm getting a little bit better at it. So I appreciate it. Any feedback, even constructive, helps. So let me know if this content is helping. If you ever want to reach out to me, these are my paths of getting a hold of me. Let's keep the conversation going. Always willing to talk shop. And I certainly appreciate the time. Thanks.